Hi guys, welcome back to our channel where we fangirl about plants, and today's video is going to be all about appreciating how strong our plants are. So I have 5 plants here that I want to talk about the good and the bad. Like the bad part where they were declining, and then the good where obviously they're alive now. So yeah, let's just get started. Okay, so for my first plant that I want to talk about is Calathea Ortifolia. So I love this plant and I am very attached to this plant. I would deem this as one of the easier Calatheas that I own because although Calatheas do have a low tolerance towards water and like the hardness of water, I noticed that this plant isn't as bothered. Now, I hope I don't jinx myself, but there's not as much browning of the tips, and also the humidity isn't as high as some of my other Calatheas, like my Calathea zebrina and stuff like that. So that's why I really enjoy this plant. Initially when I got it, it did have more leaves, and it had probably like 3 or 4 leaves, and it was growing and it was amazing and I was in love with it and it was perfect. But what had happened was that I actually had to leave my home for a couple of days because I was moving, and I actually stayed away longer than I was expecting, and I didn't water this plant. Like, it was still moist, so I didn't think I needed to water this plant. And obviously it was in the summer, so it was very hot and this plant dried out. When I got home, I literally cried because I was so sad. But yeah, this whole plant was like flopped over. You'll notice that as a theme. Watering sometimes. I initially had a hard time nailing down some of my plants' waterings because you have to learn what they like, and plants are pretty resilient, so they do have like that, like you can mess up a little bit and then they might like lose a couple leaves, but they'll come back. And that's what I really love about plants, is their resilience. This plant is definitely one of them. I'm in love with this plant because of that, and I was really sad because there was a lot of new growth on this plant and those all died. It died back like 4 or 5 leaves, like I said, and it was so upsetting because it was such a beautiful plant and it was so full and I was in love with it. And you don't want to see your plants die back, obviously. As a new plant parent, you don't really want to see that because it's sad. Like, you're so proud of a plant and then it dies back and you're like, wow, all my hard work, and you don't know if you can get it back because you are new. And that was definitely how I felt, and I was feeling very overwhelmed. But I didn't give up, although I just cut back the plant leaves that were dead, and I had like, I think like 4 leaves, yes, and it was staying. It has 5 leaves. I know you can't tell, but this is the 5th leaf. It had 4 leaves for the longest time. It had 4 leaves for like maybe like a couple of months, and I kind of understand this because it was definitely in shock. Imagine losing like 4 or 5 leaves all at the same time because of dehydration. And I was like, it's okay, take your time, you know. I watered her, I made sure that she was comfortable. Eventually she put out a new growth point because the growth point that it initially had was gone, and because of that it had to produce a whole new growth point, and that takes a lot of time and a lot of energy. So yeah, it put out this leaf right here. This is the newest leaf. Seeing that helped me feel more confident in my plant abilities, and not only is it put out this beautiful leaf, it actually put out another leaf. I don't know if you're gonna be able to see it, and it is right there. Yeah, so that's why I'm in love with this plant, and that's why I would deem this as a pretty resilient plant, because it was able to deal with that and still grow and look beautiful, and I'm in love. So yeah, and I can't wait for this to grow. Obviously it's starting to grow again now, so I'm really excited to see it like blossom into a big plant. So yeah, especially because I've seen like huge plants of these and they're so beautiful, and I just want mine to look like that. So let's hope that that happens. Okay, so yeah, so the next plant that I want to talk about is kind of like in the frame already, and it is this peace lily. So I love peace lilies. I think I fell in love with them not because of their flowers actually, but because of their foliage. I just think there's something very beautiful about how their foliage looks and how the whole plant is. So I have this peace lily Domino, and it's a species that has the white variegation, and it's beautiful and I'm in love with it. It actually flowered and the flowers died back, but that's okay. So what happened was I went away. I went back home, and I watered this. This plant was already watered, and I didn't want to water it again because I don't want it to get overwatered. So yeah, I didn't water it, and the soil was still moist. But what I didn't realize back then was this plant is root bound in this 4-inch pot. I need to up pot it, but I just want to get a ceramic pot to keep in the moisture a little bit better, so I'm waiting. So because of that, the water goes by real quick. Okay, this girl, she's already a thirsty plant, but the fact that she's root bound makes her even more thirsty. Like, goddamn, I don't know, man. So yeah, I didn't water her. I came back to my apartment, and homegirl's leaves were so, like, there was literally no water, but like to a point where her leaves were like hair. Like, it was a waterfall. It went like just down. It was the most upsetting thing to see because it literally looked like hair. Like, her stems and everything had no water in it, and I wasn't even sure if it was gonna bounce back because of how dehydrated it was. More dehydrated than my Calathea, and I've never seen a plant like this, and I was like, oh my god, is it gonna bounce back? But I watered it, and overnight it popped back up. It did lose its flowers because of the dehydration, which I don't mind. I'm just happy that the plant is alive. So ever since then, she's been well watered. She will be repotted soon enough, I promise. And obviously we love her foliage. Oh, actually, a leaf that I want to like show off is this leaf right here. You may be thinking that's not a leaf, but that's a flower, which I initially thought, but that leaf is just completely white because on the opposite side there's a flower. Like, isn't that so beautiful? I love Peacelines because the fact that it was able to bounce back from hair to a regular plant. Like, I need to shout her out. I need to shout them both out for dealing with underwatering. Okay, so the next plant is a Peperomia, and initially when I got into plants, I ended up getting a lot of Peperomias just because I was attracted to their succulent leaves and their leaf patterns. And this plant I actually found at a Lowe's or a Home Depot, and I was so excited to find it because I thought it was so cute. And it came in like a 6-inch hanging basket, as they do, and I was like, I need to repot it because I just felt like the soil wasn't good. And I was also like kind of like getting into plants, and I wasn't 100% sure or like knowledgeable about these kind of things. So yeah, I got it, I repotted it. I mean, it should have been fine, but the mistake I made was that I watered it, and I watered it really thoroughly, a little too thoroughly. Yeah, this guy got overwatered, and it was also probably stressed because I repotted it and all these kind of things. So it was dying basically, and I noticed that its foliage was very sad, and it was slowly going downhill, and I was like, oh my god. So I decided to chop up the plant, and I literally took like 6 cuttings, and these are like all of them, and it wasn't as full as this. Like, all of these smaller leaves are new growth. It mostly just had these like kind of longer leaves. These are like baby leaves, as you can see. All of this is new growth. These are the baby leaves, as you can see. And I was like, oh my god, is this gonna propagate? I just stuck them in water, like all 6 of them. I had like an army of Peperomia orbipixies, and I was just like, oh my god, I hope something happens. And they started rooting, and I was so excited because I was again like thinking that they were gonna die. But yeah, it was just something that I wasn't expecting to be successful, and when it did, it just made me really happy. And I recently potted it back up into a 4-inch pot terracotta. Peperomias have very sensitive root systems, so they are really susceptible to overwatering, which is something that I've learned over the time that I've taken care of my Peperomias. I would suggest watering less than more, and honestly, they can handle being like not watered for a pretty long time. Just feel their foliage, and when it gets kind of soft and very malleable, like this guy, as you can see, I can like move him. So I actually just watered him, which is why the terracotta pot is a darker color. I don't know if you can tell, but it is. So yeah, this is the second plant, the third plant. This is the third plant. Okay, so my next plant is quite small and a little underwhelming, but it's overwhelming to me because of the fact of where it came from. So this is my next plant. It's in a cloche, and if you don't know what a cloche is, it's basically a glass covering that you can put over plants so that it can maintain its own humidity. And this is what I've done for this begonia, as you can't tell, but it is a begonia. So this is I'm not 100% sure on how to say it, but I think it's a Julau begonia. And this is what it looks like. It's very tiny, and I am just so happy about this plant. Although it seems underwhelming, you're like, why are you happy? People have like so much bigger plants and stuff like that. It's because initially when I bought this plant, it was a 1-leaf cutting, and it was beautiful and I was in love with it. But what usually happens with begonias, like rare begonias like this, is that they have to get acclimated to the environment. Begonias and alocasias both kind of go through this, where they have to acclimate to their new environment, and by doing so they do tend to lose leaves. And this is completely normal, and if this is happening to you, don't lose faith. It will be okay, most likely. And that's what happened to this plant. I know I'm holding it and you can't really see it, but that's what happened to this plant. It had a bigger leaf than all 3 of these combined, but that leaf I noticed was slowly crisping, and I was like very kind of confused because I didn't know what to do. And then I started doing research on how you can put it in a cloche, because I had it in like that kind of terrarium, but it was open, so the humidity isn't trapped as much. So I decided to put it in a candle. This is my cloche. It's a candle. Hack. Use this as a cloche for smaller plants. These candles, it's just glass. Clean up the glass, and it's literally a cloche. It was a candle, and now it's a cloche. I put it in there, and I was like, I don't know what I'm gonna expect, but I'm just gonna see what happens. And usually what happens with begonias is that a lot of the time they can lose all their leaves, and it's very, very scarring and traumatic to me, because I just like get very anxious, and I get very sad because I'm like, oh my god, is it gonna die? But begonias are really good at bouncing back, and that's what happened to this plant. So the original leaf, so actually that 1-leaf cutting actually grew out another leaf, and I was so excited because I was like, oh my god, it's growing, it's actually going to be okay. But as time went on, like that, those leaves were getting acclimated to the environment of my room and not of the cloche. So once I put it in the cloche to increase humidity and just have it in that environment, it was dying back again, because again, it has to get used to that environment. Even if it's like a better environment, it still has to get used to it. So yeah, it was slowly dying, and I was like, okay, well, I'm gonna leave it in the cloche. I don't actually have to water him because the cloche like lets the humidity stay, so the media does stay moist. And actually what I saw like maybe a month or 2 ago was that a very small leaf was coming out. It was tiny. It was probably like 1 millimeter like wide and like 2 millimeters long. So it was very small, but I still noticed it, and I was like, okay, well, if that's what they're gonna do, and if that's what it's gonna start with, that's okay, because at least it's growing, at least it's improving. So that was the bottom leaf right there. That was that leaf. And as you can see, it grew. I was so impressed by this plant because of the fact that it was able to bounce back, even though it was literally dying. And I was like, oh my god, and I was so excited. Yeah, so I'm just really impressed by this plant because of the fact that it was able to grow these leaves, and I'm just excited for it to grow more and more, and for the leaves to get bigger, and for me to get a really cute plant out of this. But yeah, I honestly want to say this: don't throw out your plants unless you know for sure it's dead. First of all, if it's underwatered, like how my 2 plants were, bottom water it, because what happens is that bottom watering allows the watering process to happen a lot slower. Because what can happen when you have severely underwatered plants is when you pour all the water on the soil, it kind of overwhelms the roots because they are so dehydrated and they basically rot. And so bottom watering dehydrated plants is very beneficial because this is by diffusion and by capillary action. By adhesion and cohesion force. Okay, sorry, that's nerdy. Yeah, basically the soil can slowly get moist going upwards against gravity, which makes it even a slower process, although it probably will take 20 minutes to 30 minutes depending on how dry your soil is. It's a lot better and beneficial to your plants, and I have noticed a lot of success when I underwater plants, and doing this, they do pop back up, and it's amazing. The next plant that I want to talk about is another Peperomia. This is a Peperomia Hope. I told you, I have like probably at one point in my collection, the most of a genus that I had was Peperomias. Now that's not anymore, but it was. And Peperomia Hope, this plant, when I first got it, I was so happy because it had this like long like vine, quote unquote, very full in the pot. It came in a nursery pot, and I was so excited because they were so cute and just little round, cute, succulent leaves. But as time went on, I started noticing that those leaves were dying, and I was not sure why. When I initially started collecting plants, had an issue with peperomias because of their watering schedules. Like, they needed to get watered, but when I watered them, their leaves would die, and it was very frustrating. Eventually I kind of got a hang of it, but I was like, god damn, it's dying, and I was kind of getting over it because I feel like once a plant is like declining, you just automatically have this like ugh feeling, you know, like you don't want to deal with it, you don't want to take care of it anymore because you're like, oh, what do you want? And that's definitely something that still happens to me sometimes. I'm just like, oh, I don't want to do it anymore, but I've kind of gotten better at taking that and like shoving that out of my mind and just being like, okay, I'm gonna take care of you even if I'm like very irritated because something is not right. And so that's what happened to this plant. This plant actually, I realized, had severe root rot, and I wasn't sure why. It was just like a combination of a lot of things. Like, the roots weren't getting enough water, but then at the same time the soil was wet, so there was like some issue with the soil. So what I did was I cut off all this, I cut the stems and I threw out like the roots and everything because those were all useless. There's nothing gonna grow from there. And I then put new soil and I stuck in each stick of the stem, and I was like, I don't know what's gonna happen. If it works, it works, but if it doesn't, then like I wasn't doing well with this plant anyway. So yeah, it was just very like, I was like, I don't have like the time for the issues that's going on here. And honestly, that was probably a fault of mine, but I was just like, whatever. That actually ended up helping me, because I feel like sometimes when you helicopter a plant, it worsens the condition more than if you just like leave it be. So I left it be. It was not in this terracotta pot, it was in a plastic pot. I recently had to repot this, so that's why it's in this terracotta pot, but it was in a plastic nursery pot, and I just repotted it, put the stems in, and it had like all this foliage, and I just left it. I put it really close to a grow light because I was like, this pepperoni needs a lot of energy. I'm just gonna leave it. It's pretty succulent, so it probably can handle the intense light. So I did that, and I didn't really bother looking at it for probably like a couple months, like maybe a month or two. And then one day I was going up there and I noticed that these leaves were kind of wrinkled, and I was like, it's still alive, let me feel it. So I felt it felt like it needed to get watered, and that's when I like tried to pull these out, obviously very gently, but I just like did a little tug, and it was rooted. It wasn't coming out, and I was like, oh my god. So yeah, it managed to grow its roots back. It managed to survive. This was like one of my first soil propagations that actually worked, and I didn't even realize. But yeah, I was so happy because of that, and now I have a Peperomia hope that I just fell back in love with because of that. Okay, so that's the end of my video. I hope you guys enjoyed. I just really wanted to highlight these plants because these are plants that I'm pretty attached to, because of the fact that like I was able to, but they were also able to come back from like mistakes that I've made, and it also taught me a lot about plants and how to care for them. And now like I am able to care for them how they want me to and how they need it, and it's not something that can happen easily sometimes. Like, some plants do have that like initial stall time where you don't know what they want, and you have to learn because of how they teach you, by like drooping, or by like having to get repotted, or having to get them completely chopped off and starting over again. And I think it's good to like spread awareness about the fact that sometimes plants are not always fun, and it can be kind of sad because you put a lot of care into your plants and they don't always work out, but these plants did, and that's what I wanted to show you guys. Okay, so anyway, that's all for my video. I hope you guys liked it. Please like this video, comment on this video, watch some of my other 2 videos that I posted, and subscribe to my channel if you want future planting content. And yeah, I hope you guys have a great day or a great night, or whenever you're watching this. Stay safe, and see you next time.